I'm going to go over a couple trade examples. One is from last week on Tuesday, that's going to be crude oil. The other one is going to be from this morning, which is the Nasdaq. Both of them are short setups that I ended up trading. We'll go over them starting with crude oil because that is what traded first between the two of them. So going to a clean sheet here. We're going to go back to Tuesday and we are going to focus on this particular day. Now, what I first am doing to start off my mornings is I'm always tracking to see what has traded most recently and is that completing targets or is that failing? If we're seeing setups trade but then fail or be sloppy, that's not technical. I don't want to trade that sequence. I'd rather just sit on my hands and wait for something else to occur or a different product, go focus on that. If we are completing targets, which would be these green targets here, then I want to get on board with the trend, or I want to see where we are likely going and then take the reversal if that is coming. But that's more advanced. Today's lesson is mostly focused toward looking at sequences that are completing and then trading along that trend. So here we have crude oil, and this one traded a 50% short, 81.79. This happened around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the evening and I was not trading, right? This is just me the next day observing and seeing what happened in the overnight. I can see that we did complete a target though. And with that completion, we can draw the next setup like that, taking the swing high to new swing low. We can also draw the same setup to the new low and see if that trades. And so when we do that type of analysis, I wake up in the morning and I basically see that oil eventually traded this 50% short around 4:45 a.m. Again, not trading these setups, right? It's too early in the morning. I'm not around trading it at this time. So when I come to my screens around 7, I realize that we have traded this short, 81.57. And what I'm looking for is to see if this ends up completing its target of 80.94. And if it completes 80.94, then there's probably going to be more short setups on the day for oil that I can then trade by taking the next setup in the sequence and the full setup. So we complete this. This is completed around 9:30 and 9:35 a.m. Eastern time. All I'm going to do is draw the next setup in the sequence, and I also draw the full setup in the sequence. Now, if you can only take one of these setups, if you have a smaller account or you're doing an evaluation where you don't want to risk too much, then I would opt to take the full setup and not the next setup because it's always possible that the next setup ends up failing, the full setup trades, and then it continues in the trend that you predicted, and you don't want to have that. So I think it's better to miss a trade than to lose a trade, but then have it go the way you thought, right? So if you have to only take one of these setups, I would prefer to take the full setup. Now for me, I take both. I get short 81.25. That ends up going through the 61.8. Instead of getting stopped out for a loss, I actually had my stop higher up because I figured we could end up trading 81.40. And if you look at the red level, the 61.8, where I typically put my stops, that is 81.39. And so for me, I just figured it's not worth getting stopped out, having to trade the full setup 4 ticks later when it may go the direction that I predicted. So I got short one contract, 81.25, and then I got short two contracts at 81.40. My stop is at 81.60. Now, I end up exiting all of these around 81. The goal was to exit one of them at 81 and then the others at 80, 75, and 80.60. That ended up not happening because I just trailed really tight. So if I trailed more conservatively, then we would have, as you see, completed this target with a low of 80.59. So I could have had both those targets, but I trailed more tight. And because of that tighter trail, I ended up getting all of them out at about 81. The first one exited for 81, and then as we made a lower low, I ended up trailing to 81. So I got 40 ticks from the full setup, which is 80 ticks total there. And then from 81.25, which was that next short setup, I got 25 ticks there. So 105 ticks. It's not bad. It's fine. But obviously, it could have been a lot more had I just been more patient and let it trail out. And the main lesson here is to basically be patient Observe what's happened when you wake up in the morning to trade and look at your screens. Observe what's happened. And then from there, you can act. If the setups are breaking, not holding, not worth trading, sit on your hands, wait. If we're completing targets, then go ahead and try to follow that trend and see if you can take more trades in that trend. Now, moving to the Nasdaq from this morning, this is a very similar idea. Here we're going to have some more components to it. So we have this larger time frame, 50% short, 15,594. We then have another 50% short, taking the swing high of that area to our swing low, gives us 15,473 quarter. Now, what I'm going to end up doing is going to a 512 tick chart. If you are unfamiliar with what a tick chart is, that means that every 512 trades or transactions, there is a new candle. So instead of being time-based, it is trade-based. This can be really useful when you're day trading and you want to see how volume and price action are working together, because typically the more candles you're seeing here, that means that the more volume we have in the market, because it is, again, tick-based and not time-based. So going from this resistance that we just pointed out at 15,473, there was a 50% short setup that traded at 15,443. Now, the key here again is that I'm not trading this setup. This is the first setup in the sequence. I'm just observing. I want to see if we hold this or if we fail this. And to make my point more clear, the reason why I'm waiting to see if this completes or if this fails is because a lot of the times you will see these first setups fail. If you try to take first setups, more times than not, you're going to have losers. So we can eliminate that by just observing the first setup in the sequence. If it completes, we take the next, maybe even the full. If it fails, we just wait for the next setup to occur. Now, the importance in that is because if we look at the Nasdaq earlier this morning, this 50% short traded 15,436. This is around 5:30 in the morning. Notice how we do not complete the target. This target does not complete. We end up failing. And so that's just the reason why I like to wait and see completions to confirm the trend for me, being objective, right? So again, going back to where we were, this morning we have this 50% short setup, and then we end up running to our target, 15,000 and about 400. That completes. What you can do is look for the next setup, which is going to be this high to this low, or you can draw the full setup as well. Now, for me, this is a very micro time frame. The tick chart is extremely micro, and the setup that did complete, this is where experience can kick in, right? So sometimes there's really no science to it. It's just more trader discretion or something like that. What happened here is we have a very small setup. It's about 7 or 8 points wide between the 50 and 61.8. So if you're not familiar with the Nasdaq, it's a pretty micro setup. So because of that, I elect to not take the next setup in the sequence. It just seems too micro, and that it's more likely to fail than hold from what I've seen most recently in the last few weeks in the Nasdaq. So what I decided to do is basically just take the full setup. And if it doesn't trade, it doesn't trade. It's part of the game. It happens. I've certainly missed plenty of setups because of that. I elect to not take the next setups and just take the fulls. But like I said earlier, if I'm going to take one of them, I'm going to take the full over the next. So in this case, that's what happened. I take the full setup. 15,423 quarter is that level. I limit short 2 contracts, 15,420. My stop is at 440. 20-point stop, 2 contracts. That is 40 points total if I lose both. Now, the first contract I get out of is at 390. That's 30 points. And then I exit at 360. That's going to be 60 points. So I get 90 points total on this trade. Again, risking 40. So a little bit over 2 times risk, which is really great. And overall, 90 points total. That's $1,800 for the NASDAQ. And so it's a good trade and a great way to kick off the week. Anytime you can start the week profitable, it's a great sign. Now, I wanted to see this complete. And if this completed, I would have liked to take maybe in that case, the next setup in the sequence. And again, that same setup, new low for the full. But we actually don't complete this target. We end up reversing. There was a retest. Some people in the trade room that I have, that Discord, they did take the retest and made some money. I did not take the retest today. I just observed because it seemed like the Russell and the S&P were heading higher and breaking short setups. And so with the indices, I like to take note of what the others are doing. And this morning, it just made sense for me to stay away from taking more trades in the Nasdaq, especially shorts, with the way it was going. Now, it ended up later reversing lower and completing this target around 11:30. But between 11 and 1, I head out, get some other stuff done, come back in the afternoon around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And when I came back, there just wasn't anything here for me to trade. And so that was all I had this morning. But just a couple quick examples there of how I'm basically observing the market. When I wake up and get to my screens, I'm analyzing what happened in the overnight, what larger levels are in play, and then what's the intraday doing? Are we holding longs on the intraday? Are we holding shorts on the intraday? What targets are being completed? Whatever targets are being completed, that is the trend that I want to trade. Remember, we're day trading. We're not swing trading or investing when it comes to this particular, chart. And so because of that, I'm not too you know, uh, occupied with what the larger time frame is. What I want to see is what is completing right now on the intraday. And so for oil last Tuesday, it was shorts. And for NASDAQ this morning, it was shorts. And so I went short. Of course, if we have a daily time frame long setup and we're heading into that area and the shorts are holding for the day, I may just sit on my hands and observe and see what's going to happen, because we are trading both levels. And the S&P kind of had an example with that. I don't have any trades in the S&P from today, but what I can say is that we kind of have what I'm talking about, where we have this 50% short 45.56. From there, we have this 50% short of 45.27 quarter. Now, what ended up happening with the S&P is there was a 50% long. This was 45.08. This ended up trading the short setup, reversed lower, then it retested the short. It also completed the long target. So again, just like we have with our short setups, we take the next setup in the sequence, and we can also draw the same setup to the new high. The next setup ends up piercing that 61.8. We basically, didn't quite trade, but we came into the area of the full 50% long 45.12. And this is where it may be time for, if you are long bias, maybe you go long here and you trust the setup. If you're short bias, maybe you take the retest and trust the short setup. For me, I would just sit on my hands and I would just observe and wait and see what the edge is. If we break this long by breaking below 45.07, maybe we have more shorts. If we continue higher and break the short setup, or like we just did, complete the target, now I can go ahead and look for more longs until we retest 45.56. So that's where it can get tricky, is if you have larger levels that are going against what the intraday is. But for the most part, it's the ideal situation is that you have larger levels that are telling you one direction, and then on the micro time frame for where we day trade, we see that continuing, which is what we got in the NASDAQ, right? The NASDAQ had the larger short setups. We had the 50% short at 594, the 50% short at 473, and then inside of 473 is where we had that short that we had this morning. Okay, so just wanted to cover that. That's all I got today. If you want to learn more about how I trade, you can join the trade room. There'll be a link in the bio below here. Otherwise, if you like the video, leave it a like, subscribe. It helps out a lot, and I will catch you guys in the next one.